Ah, famous fictional agents: James Bond, Jack Bauer, Ethan Hunt, George Smiley. Kim Possible! Yes, despite leading a variety of novels, movies, and even a TV show, I don't know if Jack Ryan is quite in the same league as so many other famous espionage figures, despite being played by a variety of A-list actors over the years: Alec Baldwin, Harrison Ford, Ben Affleck, Chris Pine, John Krasinski. I'd hazard that a good few of these actors have public profiles that eclipse even some of the actors who have played James Bond. So why has the character of Jack Ryan never really joined the ranks of cinema's espionage finest? Good evening, movie fans. This is the question that I had in my head when I approached the hunt for Red October, and it occurred to me that I've never actually seen a single Jack Ryan film before. Which sounds slightly blasphemous of me to say, given that this is a James Bond and spy movie themed channel, and I have to confess though, I have seen and enjoyed all of the episodes so far of the John Krasinski TV series, 2 seasons in, and I have very vague memories of moments from the Harrison Ford movies from when my dad was watching them at home when I was a kid, but then I also remembered that Jack Ryan was Amish and on the run from Tommy Lee Jones, so I may be mixing up my Fords here. Obviously, the big, probably main reason that I'm looking at The Hunt for Red October on this channel is that it stars the legend himself, Sir Sean Connery, and indeed, the poll I put out to supporters of this channel on Patreon was, which Sean Connery movie shall I look at next, not which Jack Ryan movie shall I look at. I forgot that this was even a Jack Ryan film until I was preparing to watch it, and perhaps, unbelievably, this is the first time I'm ever seeing this movie. Which feels like a weird thing to admit, because other than Bond, Indiana Jones, The Rock and The Untouchables, I think that The Hunt for Red October is probably one of the actor's better remembered hits. It co-stars Alec Baldwin as Jack Ryan, of course, and that's kind of all I knew about the film going in, but the cast credits kept going at the start. I was just getting more and more wowed, like Scott Glenn, Sam Neill, Stellan Skarsgård, James Earl Jones, Tim Curry? And to top it off, it's directed by John McTiernan, who of course directed Die Hard, but also directed Pierce Brosnan in the remake of The Thomas Crown Affair, a film that I've covered on this channel previously and absolutely loved. So yeah, I was really questioning why I hadn't sought this out sooner by the end of the opening credits. In a nutshell, the plot concerns Sean Connery as Captain Marco Ramius, a Lithuanian-born commanding officer of the titular Soviet nuclear submarine, the Red October. It's 1984, and the Cold War is still on, which makes it concerning for everyone involved when the captain seemingly goes rogue and breaks away from his commands to seemingly defect to the United States. Only this is news to the United States, who have CIA analyst Jack Ryan on the case, along with a bunch of other characters all trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Meanwhile, tensions are rising on both sides of the Iron Curtain, with the threat of escalation to all-out nuclear war, and politicians and Secret Service officials begin getting involved. That is my very broad strokes description of the plot, but there are so many twists and turns in this, and I really like that there are characters who you're not even sure whether you're supposed to believe what you're being told regarding their motivations and what they're up to. I'll start this off by talking about Sean Connery, because I think he's really terrific in this, but first, yes, let's get it out of the way early. It is amusing that a Lithuanian-born Soviet submarine captain is speaking Russian with a Scottish accent. The film actually does do a really good job of signaling a transition between the characters talking in Russian and then switching to them talking in English, but the implication is that they're still speaking in their native language. It's just that we, the audience, are understanding it as English. It's kind of interesting that the film even really feels the need to point this out. I'm used to just films being kind of like, well, like in GoldenEye, you know, when you have a bunch of characters who would not be speaking English in that situation together, but for the sake of audience not having to read subtitles for too long a time, they just have them speak English for an English-speaking audience benefit.
But in this case, Victor is right. It would have been better if you had not informed Moscow.
Oh, Vasily. Moscow is not to worry.
In Red October, it's just slightly more amusing because you have one of the most iconic and often imitated voices in all of cinema, Sean Connery, here, along with, "Oh, hello, I'm English Tim Curry," and then there's Australian Sam Neill, who I think is trying to do some kind of Russian accent in a couple of places, but it's really inconsistent, and it's just funny to have all of these different accents speaking the English language while they're all supposedly Russian, but anyway. So I digress. Connery is very much the star of this film, and he commands every scene he's in. I completely and totally buy him as the man in charge of this submarine. He's having to spout a lot of technical jargon regarding submarines that I certainly don't understand, but because of the delivery, the expressions, the craft of the filmmaking, I didn't have any issues not knowing what was going on throughout this film. I suppose, though, I was a bit surprised at the level of, well, procedural that this was at. Like, a more recent film that I've seen that I had a similar kind of feeling with was the Tom Hanks film Greyhound, though there are many more examples, of course, but, you know, films where terminology is being used that I don't know if it's correct or authentic, but it's convincing enough for me as a layman to buy, and if I were to just, like, read what was going on, if I were to read the script, I probably wouldn't have a clue what was going on, but because of the direction, the editing, the action, it creates a real wonderful sense of tension and drama. Sort of reminds me of that Hitchcock quote that I'm definitely paraphrasing here, but the idea that, you know, Hitchcock would be mindful of crafting his movies so that, you know, the sound could completely switch off and an audience would still understand what was happening if the film kept on playing through the visuals. Here in Red October, the sound is obviously here, but I'm taking my cues about what's going on from the filmmaking and the expressions of the actors rather than the dialogue itself in some cases. So while I would cite Connery as the star, he's the first build and he's the most prominent on the poster after all, Alec Baldwin does star as Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, and given that future films in this series, can we call it a series? I don't know what level of continuity we're gonna get with this character, but I know that he is the top billed lead character going forward, not Baldwin himself. Other actors will be top billed, and you know what, I think that Baldwin does good work here, but this is Connery's film, and I will always think of this as being Connery's film. The only things offhand that I can think of comparing this dynamic to is, like, Tim Burton's Batman and The Godfather, because when I think of both of those films, I think of Jack Nicholson and I think of Marlon Brando, even though the protagonists are technically Michael Keaton and Al Pacino. But the top billed stars just give such iconic scene-stealing performances that I just can't help but think of it as their film. But hey, I'm a Connery fan, so I'm not complaining. And besides, I think this thing is full of really great supporting cast members. Not every character necessarily has something terribly profound to do. I feel like some people are here very much just to be red herrings once a bit of the mystery and duplicitousness gets brought into proceedings. But hey, James Earl Jones and Tim Curry are actors that I'm thrilled to see in anything, so even though their parts are relatively small, I'm just happy to have a cast here that I largely really adore. Stellan Skarsgård is also here in a small role as another Soviet sub-captain on the tail of the Red October, and I love the lighting in his scenes. You just know he's a baddie from all of the red and green lighting going on. This thing takes place over a variety of submarines and ships, and it's a credit to the lighting and the cinematography, and Jan de Bont is the cinematographer here, by the way, the guy who would go on to direct Speed, but it's a credit to those things that I never felt lost or confused as to which submarine I was on. They're all lit with a distinctive enough lighting and designed a certain way that even when it's cutting between all of them in a sequence, it's just so well crafted, I was never confused by the geography of the filmmaking. Perhaps I can't quite extend that same compliment to some of the special effects works. I mean, there are some exterior shots of the submarines, and in places it's so dark and murky, and sorry, but most submarines look the same to me, so I was a little bit like, who's chasing who here exactly? It was never enough of an issue to become a major problem for me, though, personally. Just as an aside, I do kind of love special effects works in films of the late 80s and early 90s, an era where CGI was just on the cusp of becoming the standard, but in this era they were still using models and some older-fashioned techniques, but on a really great scale. While they're, of course, dated by today's standards, I did really enjoy the effects work in this nonetheless. Overall, for me, The Hunt for Red October was a blast, and one of those films that I can't believe it took me so long to finally get around to watching. It's tense, fun, and exciting, and manages that without being terribly, action-packed in the way that you might expect. A good deal of it is, like, characters in small dark spaces looking worried at each other, but I think John McTiernan is a pretty phenomenal thriller director, actually, and he has such a brilliant judgment for pacing, and the fact that he can craft a film as suspenseful as this with a relatively confined physical space is really admirable. As a kickoff for a Jack Ryan movie series, though, it's a bit odd if it was ever intended to be that. I mean, I like the character and he's certainly co-protagonist here, but if I didn't know that this was based on a book series with him as the lead character, I'm not sure I'd have come out of this anticipating what he was going to do next, and I do find it a bit amusing that even when you look at the Jack Ryan movie box set, Sean Connery's image is far larger than Baldwin's on the front cover, which tells you all you need to, I think. That being said, I hope to cover more Jack Ryan films in the future, particularly the next couple, as I am a big Harrison Ford fan, but I would be very interested to see how this character is further explored and grown into a fully fledged leading espionage hero in his own right. And if you would like to have a say in deciding which non-Bond movie I come to review next, then please do head over to my Patreon page for more details there. The link is in the video description box below. And also below you can click the subscribe and Mrs. Bell notification buttons to stay super up to date for whenever I upload new content to this channel. There are other links below as well, including links to my Twitter page, Facebook page, Instagram page, Letterboxd page if you care to follow me over there. And of course, you can let me know your own thoughts about The Hunt for Red October in the comments section below, as well as, like, do the Jack Ryan films get better from here? It's like a cultural blind spot for me. I really don't know that much about this character or his appearances in film. So as well as letting me know your own thoughts on this film and Sean Connery's performance in particular, yeah, please let me know if I've got movies to look forward to, or if this is truly the peak of the Jack Ryan mountain. And with all that being said, and until next time, movie fans, so long for now.